Hello and welcome to Congressman Henry Cuellar's Capitol Report. Your voice from Washington for the 28th District of Texas.
Every day, taxpayers interact with the federal government on a regular basis, whether it's through the passport services, student loans through the direct loan program to pay for higher education.
Every month, we bring home to you the issues that matter the most. And now, here's your update from the nation's capital.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Congressman Henry Cuellar's Capitol Report. I'm joined here with Congressman Cuellar from the 28th District of Texas, and we're also joined today by Jamienne Studley, the Deputy Undersecretary at the Department of Education. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Congressman Cuellar, do you want to start just by telling us what you've been up to in Washington since we spoke last?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for being here with us, number one. Number two, appropriations. What we're waiting for right now is, of course, the first step. That is the Budget Committee has to present a budget, has to pass the House and the Senate. They will set the contours, so the lines, the allocations, should I say, the amounts that are going to be given over to the appropriations. And then from there, whatever the top line is, then each of the different subcommittees is going to get a certain amount, the departments on that, the allocations. Hopefully education will get a lot. I used to be the chairman of the budget for education in Texas, both higher and public. Those were the good old days in Texas where 75% of all the new monies of what Texas brought in went to education there. So it's important. So we're going back to this. We're going back to the appropriation. So we've been having hearings and in the next few months we'll start marking up bills, and hopefully that will determine what the multi-trillion-dollar budget is going to look at. I do want to say this because I think this is very important, that when we look at the $3.6, $3.7 trillion budget that we have every year, 2/3 of that is on automatic. That is veterans benefits, Social Security, Medicare, the entitlements, what we call the entitlements. And I know some people don't like the word entitlements. They say, well, I earned that money. So it was on automatic, the figures I gave you. And then the 1/3 is what we call discretionary funding. Out of the discretionary funding, about half of it goes to the military. The other half, less than $500 billion, then goes to everything else, which includes education, transportation, healthcare, border security, everything except for the military. So when everybody looks at the whole multi-trillion-dollar budget that we have every year, just keep in mind that when we talk about education, it's half of the discretionary, and then that includes everything else along with that. So I'm one of those believers that I think, I wish we would put more education, because education is the greatest equalizer that we have in our society. So that's where we are right now. Is we're in the process of starting the appropriation hearings.
Great. Well, since the topic of the day is education, Congressman, do you want to talk about your educational journey, where you went to school, and how that kind of shaped the philosophies that you have on education?
Yes. My mom and dad went only to first and 3 years of of education. That is first grade and third grade. In the old days, in that part of the world, they would take out the young kids to go work in the fields, in the piscas, which means that the more hands you had, the more money they had. So they literally would take the kids out and go work in the fields. My parents were migrant workers. They went to Colorado, they went to Utah, they went to a whole bunch of other places to go work. I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and my parents, when we were going to school, even right now, my parents don't know English. They might know 1 or 2 words in English, so it was a little different because we didn't have the mom could sit down with you or dad could sit down with you and help you with homework. My parents just didn't have the skills, but they had a lot of love for us, so they would say, don't get up till you finish your homework. And it was interesting because I remember at that time they would say, all of y'all are going to get a good education. You got to finish high school. Because at that time, in those days, it was high school that was enough. Now it's college and beyond that. And I'm sure you're going to be talking about that. So, I put a lot of emphasis on education. I went to a community college, got a degree there, then I transferred to Georgetown University here in Washington, D.C., graduated from here, went back to Texas and got my law degree, my PhD, my master's from UT and A&M. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in education. If I can say this, because I used to chair the budget for both public and higher education in Texas, I'm a big believer in education. And when I was there, I was the author of House Bill 713, which is the largest scholarship in Texas history, which is a Texas grant. And the Texas grant not only provides funding to kids that didn't have the money to go to school, but it also consolidated some things. For example, we set up a one-stop center for information, because in the old days in Texas, you had the federal dollars, then you had the state and the privates. So we have a 1-800 number where people can call and get all that information. And back some years ago, I added an amendment here where we did the same thing. I think you all have done that already, but also have a one-stop center where people can just call for whether you're a student, a parent, a teacher, to get that information. So I'm really looking forward to listening to you, because you're talking about something that's very, very important and dear to my heart.
Good. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at the Department of Education and what the department does as a whole?
Sure. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's a good thing that college degrees are not finite, because you would have had to leave some on the table for a few other people to be able to get some. But fortunately, it is something that we can make more of. We just have to have the collective commitment to do that and to create the kind of opportunity that you were speaking about. It is very central to the President's vision for the country, and I think for the families in your district on every level. We all understand how important it is to have education opportunity for all, to let people go as far as their talents will take them, to have my special responsibilities are in the higher education side, college and career training. And I think that's important for people to understand. When we talk about college, we mean a wide range of different kinds of preparation. The degrees that you have, the professional education, and also career training that suits people for particular jobs right now. But we also want those to lead them to opportunities to go into management, to go into public life, to transfer to another level of higher education if they've received a specific career-related training. So we think in the department about all of those different pathways, but we want to be sure that the pathways are all open to everybody. The President was very clear that he sees that as both part of the opportunity initiative and also part of our economic health, that it's important to communities, to states, to the nation as a whole, for people to have the preparation that's necessary. And families at those kitchen tables that you were talking about understand now that high school is not sufficient to prepare people for leadership roles, for professional roles, and also for the kind of technical and advanced manufacturing and fields that required math and science backgrounds to do things in our factories and in the innovation areas that are going to be central to Texas and all of our states being able to support good jobs and healthy communities. So all of that needs to come together, and we're very appreciative that there are people who are looking out for those as we develop the budget and develop our policy going forward.
You know, and the President's been very good at, when we've had some of this budget cuts, sequestration, he's been very good at protecting one thing that's very important, is the Pell Grants. He's been extremely important. I mean, he's been strong on the Pell Grants. And of course, the other thing that we worked on the loans, on the interest rates, reducing the interest rates, that is important. You're trying to get rid of the middle person, because that literally saves, in the long run, thousands of dollars to families that get a loan.
We're very proud of the things that we've already done, and some of them those are exactly the highlights that we care about. We've increased Pell Grants and a much wider proportion of students have been able to receive them to help them go to college. We're reaching out to borrowers who have gone to school and taken loans to make it clear how many options they have for repayment. So if anybody has student loans and is thinking about how they can repay them, there are lots of choices, and we're getting better all the time at making it clear and streamlined so that people can have manageable payments and stay current while they build their future. We are also simplifying everything that we can to help people apply for that assistance to go to college, because there's a lot that's available. The form that people have to fill out, called a FAFSA form, has gotten simpler over time, and we are doing everything we can to make it easy for families to know what they can borrow, know what grants they can get, money that they don't ever have to pay back, and to let people see what their choices are so that they can go smoothly into education, whether it's right from high school or for returning students in their 20s or their 50s who say, I could use some more education. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to do that, and then to gain the benefits afterward and not feel burdened down by the loans that they need to repay, but can do so in lots of ways that may fit their budgets.
Well, I have to say, on the simplification of the FAFSA, you guys have been great.
Thank you.
You have been great. I know that because since I've been involved in this field, I've seen the form transform. And just a couple years ago, when my oldest was going off to college, we had to fill out the form. And compared to the old days, you all have done a great job at simplifying. And it's important because it's important to for the student and the parents to put that together. And y'all, I just have to say that you've done a great job at simplifying the form.
Well, that is something where we're here on Capitol Hill right now, where there's a wide agreement about the value of what we've already done and the potential for going even further. So we want to make this not a barrier, but a great helper to people who want to get more education after high school.
Good. Well, one of the priorities for the Department of Education, I know, is making education accessible and affordable for everyone. What are some of the department's proposals to address the rising college costs, which, as you both know, have been skyrocketing in recent years?
One of the most exciting and freshest is called America's College Promise. It's a great name for a terrific idea. The notion here is that 2 years of college, 2 years of education after high school, should be free and universal, should be available to everybody. Just the way this country a century ago said high school ought to be available for everybody. We now want to make that promise extend 2 more years for different kinds of training, but all of it through community colleges, which in so many areas are the linchpin of education. They can be a pathway onto a bachelor's degree. They can be a pathway into a great job. They can be a starting point or just what people need at that given moment. So it would apply to associate's degrees and certificates. People would be able to earn that first half of a bachelor's degree or get skills that they need in the workplace. And the idea is to make it completely natural for people to go on to that next step. And we would be working with the states. One of the very important factors in this is to rebuild that partnership with states in which the federal government and the states helped together to support post-secondary education. Many states have withdrawn that funding, moved those dollars to other things, and we'd like to encourage them to bring it back to help fund post-secondary education. One way to do that is through America's College Promise, to say, we will put up some money if you will sustain your effort and grow your effort to fund higher education. And together, we can make it possible for people to all go to community college, which we think would be a tremendous statement about opportunity and the importance of widespread education.
Absolutely.
And community colleges are extremely important. If you look at, again, using Texas as an example, half of our students are in community colleges, and I'm a graduate. I got an associate in fine arts at the Laredo Community College, so I'm very familiar with it. And in fact, if you look at it, community colleges, I want everybody to go a 4-year and beyond, but there's some folks that are just going to do a couple of years, and if they can come out with a degree or a certificate where they can go into nursing, welding, or whatever the case might be, I've always said 4 years of college, each year of 4 years is value added. 2 years is value added to what they can produce later on. Community colleges are very flexible to meeting the business demands in a community. I have community colleges in the San Antonio areas, in the Atascosa areas, in the Laredo area, in the Valley also. And community colleges are they're just great for the community. And again, a lot of the students, about half or so in Texas, go to community colleges. So glad the president's put an emphasis on community colleges.
Well, another part of the education equation are the teachers. How are you incentivizing quality of teaching at the Department of Education?
We obviously recognize that teaching is the central resource at all levels. So in the K-12 space, we were just talking, for example, about a project called Teach to Lead, started by the department a year ago and involving teachers to make it clear that you don't have to leave the classroom to be a leader in education. Often the only way for excellent teachers to advance or get public respect was to become principals and superintendents. And while that's important, we also want to grow the teachers who are in the classroom. We're working in lots of ways to help build that capacity, including through improvements in teacher education, which is where college education meets K-12. It's a very important loop that colleges have to do a good job in preparing a good and diverse teaching workforce so that the K-12 education gets the effective teachers we need to create that virtuous cycle of educating young people from all backgrounds to be able to go on. At the college level, we're also doing research and trying to share good practices about what makes for excellence in teaching. So there are lots of things, some of them cool technological improvements, some of them good old-fashioned things like reminding people when their work is due. And often the most interesting things happen at the intersection, where you can use technology to support an advising system, or teachers use material in the content of their courses online and then use their time in the class to do seminars and discussion. So these things go by names like flipped classrooms, where you do the technology outside and do the people time in your classroom instead of having a lecture, and blended work, where you use both of them. And there's just a lot being done to try to take advantage of what's best. The department has a chance to help share that information so that people know what's going on elsewhere if it's really excellent. I'd like to give you one example that's a Texas example. At the University of Texas at Austin, they've done some wonderful leadership work to understand what factors make the difference in whether first-generation students from backgrounds where they weren't as familiar as college and their parents couldn't provide those answers to them in the panicked Tuesday night call in which a student was trying to deal with the change and adaptation of being at college. And at UT Austin, they did some really fine work to understand how to help people realize that they do belong here, and everybody has some surprises and might get a setback or a grade on an early test that wasn't what you were used to, and that shouldn't disrupt their whole college expectation, that how to help them ride through those things. And people all over the country are following that research. That's just one example of how we try to help support specific innovations and creative ways of helping people persist and complete from college, and then also share the best of it so that it applies around the country. And we do the same thing when a LaGuardia Community College in New York has a wonderful success, and we help bring that to people in Texas who want to use it at their community colleges.
That's great.
I think the key point here is that we got to keep in mind the words of President John F. Kennedy when he said many years ago that the progress of a nation can be no swifter than the progress of its educational system. And this is why this you know, whether it's at K or it's a pre-K or you know, 12 years or 16 or graduate work, whatever the case might be, the educational system that you all are putting so much emphasis and the states are putting so much emphasis are so key to our growth of our economy and the growth of our progress of our nation. In the old days, the competition was one part of the state to another part of the state, or maybe one state to another state. And now the competition is India, China, you know, name the other countries on that. And this is why we got to make sure that all parts of the educational system are doing well. And again, it's the accessibility, you know, the quality of the teachers, the partnerships that have to be set up, because competition is not across the street anymore. It's from a global perspective.
I woke up this morning to something on my Facebook page that had a picture of, it was all little boys in Mongolia in front of little tiny children's size and children's colored computers. And it said Mongolia has pulled together its resources to make incredible educational progress. And I'm sure you'd like to be able to say that for every school district in your district and in our country. There is some good news. One of the great things is that all of this effort at every level is starting to pay off. The high school graduation rate is higher now than it's ever been, and we're closing the gap, the achievement gap that has had some groups of students lagging behind is getting narrowed. So Hispanic and African American students are getting closer to that average, and that's wonderful. That's really showing that our effort to both move the population as a whole and to make sure that people don't lag behind is paying off. And we'd like to be able to continue the investments. You started talking about appropriations, and while money isn't by any means all that's involved, it does take money to get good teachers to do the kinds of diagnostics to understand why somebody is learning and why somebody else isn't, and to bring them the teaching resources to be able to make that progress and to finish high school. And
so you would say in this time of, even with sequestration and the budget cuts, as a country we're still progressing in education and moving forward, and you're still seeing improvements as a whole?
Well, and so many of these things take so long to develop. The results that we're seeing now in high school completion probably had something to do with early childhood education opportunities and reading programs early in elementary school. So it's important that we keep investing and that we not pull back. So I think this is a long-term picture, and we need to sustain those investments.
Yeah, I mean, sequestration certainly hits the federal budget, but in reality, and I don't know what the numbers are now, but when I used to be the chairman, if you looked at a regular public school district in Texas, a school district, 48% of the dollars came from local, 45 came in from the state, and about 6% came from the federal government. You know, the Supreme Court and what was it, Rodriguez versus Edgewood, pretty much said it's a state responsibility, not a federal responsibility when it comes to funding the schools. But at the federal, but at the higher ed folks level, you're right. Back in Texas, when we were there, we started the Closing the Gap initiative. And in Texas, the numbers have actually really improved, especially with minorities, Hispanics and blacks. And keep in mind, like state of Texas, the face is changing for the state of Texas. 51% of the first graders right now in Texas are Hispanic students. So it's good that when we talk about education, that everybody graduates from high school. And I've always said to my chancellors when I was there, I said there's also dropouts in colleges. They used to debate me about that, but I said bottom line is we measure 4 years of college and 6 years. And there was one school, I'm not going to mention that school, but there was one university that at the end of 6 years, the graduation rate was 11%, which means if you had 100 students, 4 years of college, measured in 6 years, only 11% of them would graduate from college. So And you know, they're getting better from what I understand, but you know, I've always said, because I think the dropout issue is one of the biggest issues that is affecting all students, but especially minorities. In the old days, and again, every school district's different, but we used to have dropouts. Anglo students, 9th grade to 12th grade, we would have about a 27% dropout rate. This is Texas numbers. And African Americans were 34%. Hispanics, which were the fastest growing sector, we were at 49%. And then those are the ones that would not graduate. Then if you look at the kids that would graduate from high school, 51% of them would go into the workforce and military. And then 49% would go into 4 years, and then you add the dropout rates. And at that time, don't know what it is right now, but at that time, the average was about 34% graduation of 4 years and 6 years. So you can see a fast-growing population like the Hispanics, by the time they graduate from college, it was a small amount. Then if you went into a PhD,
right.
Then you're talking about a small line. But there's been a lot of progress, and what y'all have been doing is fantastic.
Let me, I know our time is wrapping up. There's a really wonderful example I'd like to mention that's right in your neighborhood. In the Rio Grande Valley Promise, there's a community effort across elementary school and high school through college to help students be college ready and complete college. And it speaks just to what you're talking about. Community groups coming together in the Rio Grande Valley, McAllen area to work with businesses, with philanthropy, have superintendents and college presidents plan and identify who is completing, when they don't, which high school did they come from, what supports do they need, how can the community rally together so that it helps people go to college, be able to make that step, but also to help them make it through and be successful after that. And it's one of 32 commitments that was part of a White House summit that we put together. And it's a model for communities around the country to do that kind of partnership with our help, with state involvement, but also at the very level of how do you help families do this? How do you help the student through? How can you partner with businesses to do internships that might make the difference in whether a student sees why it would be worthwhile to finish their education? Right. So we're very excited about all of those levels coming together to the place that really matters, which is student by student achieving success.
Definitely, that's great.
And let me just,
Sure.
because I know our time is over, but again, federal government has a role, state government has a role, local government has a role, the community in general has a role, but the parents are central. The parents are key. I mean, the parents, schools are not babysitting services. They go learn, and parents have to be involved with their kids. Very important.
Well, really quickly, where can people go to find more information from the Department of Education or from your office, Congressman?
www.cuellar.housegov.
Great.
And www.ed.gov, ed.gov is a great source for everything from borrowing and FAFSA information to go to college to some of the latest, most exciting research.
Great.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Cuellar, Deputy Undersecretary Studley, for joining us today and for your commitment to education. And thank you to our viewers for joining us here in Washington, D.C. We'll see you soon.